What has Aquinas to do with Ghibli? Well, stick around and you'll find out. Welcome to Mirifica, New Mexico, the channel where we look at questions of wonder from the perspectives of faith and reason, philosophy and theology. I'm your host, Daniel Kelly, and today what I want to do is look at, examine, and defend one of the most foundational wonders of the human experience, one thing that is available to all men, and the last time that culture really lost it as a whole, so it wasn't available to its ordinary people. It took about 1,200 years of Christian penance and purgation to get back to this foundational wonder. So I'm very, very excited to be examining this with you. It's put a lot of work into this, so I'm very happy to share it with you. If you enjoy my content, please like this video, comment on it. I love the comments. Subscribe to this channel and support us on our locals community where we have even more content, and you can find a link to that in the description. There's a really important quote that I want to start off with. I think is super important for us today, that Pope Benedict XVI, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, said that our society, our civilization, is one of death and dead things. Now, this is a little bit different than Pope St. John Paul II's culture of death, which most people have heard of. He said that right now we have a culture of death, Pope John Paul II. But what Pope Benedict is talking about is that we've kind of stepped outside of nature. We've put ourselves outside of nature, outside of the world of living things. Nature is now something not that we're part of, but something outside of us that we do things to, like we experiment on, we examine all this stuff, and thus it's dead to us. So we're not part of nature. It's not a living thing to us. It's something like a chair or, a piece of marble that we do things to, we experiment on. And thus, that means if we're there just fiddling around, if it's just an object to do things to fiddle around with, thus it's dead. So everything that we focus our lives on is dead. Our culture is one of dead things. That's what our culture, Western culture, and actually it's spread all around the world, but it came from Western culture. That's where we are right now. And if we step outside of nature in this way, if we step outside of the world of creation that God gave us, of living things, and step into this dead world, it does two things. And the first, to give you an idea, I just want to read a little bit from Pope Benedict's sermons that were published in the book In the Beginning. He says, "One of the first indications of a new way of looking at things appeared about the time of the Renaissance with Galileo, when he said that if nature did not voluntarily answer our questions, but hid its secrets from us, then we would submit it to torture, and in a racking inquisition, extract the answers from it that it would otherwise not give. The construction of the instruments of the natural sciences was for him, as it were, a readying of this torture, whereby human persons, despot-like, get the answers that they want to have from the accused." Right? So Galileo was all like, okay, this new rational enlightenment thinking that we're doing, we're going to torture nature if she won't give us the answers. And that's the first way. Creation's no longer something to be cherished. It's something to get something out of, to get utility out of, to force to bend to our wishes with, as Galileo said, with torture, if necessary. And we're going to get just whatever we want out of the place that we find ourselves. So very utilitarian, a very active kind of, not just receiving, but active. We're doing this to nature. And that's led to a lot of horrible consequences. We talk about the environment all the time, and this is one of the ways that comes from. So when we see all these horrible consequences that is coming around from this attitude that we have in Western culture, we kind of get disgusted with ourselves, and we should. That's a good thing. But one of the bad things we do, because we've removed ourselves with nature and we're disgusted with what we're doing to nature, a lot of times we say, this is the second thing that this mindset leads to, okay, we should just take ourselves out of the equation. And that's what a lot of false environmentalism wants to do now. It's like human beings are the problem. We need to eliminate human beings because the world's just great without it. And of course, there's many problems wrong with this attitude. One thing is it's just foolish on its face, because if you think the ecosystems would be negatively impacted by honeybees disappearing, and they would be, it would be horrible, and they are disappearing, and that's horrible. How much more integral to ecosystems are human beings. And if you don't realize that, you don't know anything about how interconnected all life is. So both those attitudes, the one where we're torturing stuff to get what we want out of it, that the bad scientific attitude, there's a good scientific attitude that Western culture has, but the bad one. And then the second thing of once we're sick of ourselves, we see that we make these nuclear bombs and we destroy the rainforest and we do all these horrible stuff, then we're like, okay, we just need to take ourselves out of the equation. Both those are very bad. And I want to ask, how did we come here? So these attitudes only come about in a post-Christian culture. And then that culture, of course, affects other cultures, as C.S. Lewis describes in his book, That Hideous Strength. But it infects other cultures, but it starts in a post-Christian culture. And a lot of people blame Christianity for it. They're like, hey, look, there's a command right in Genesis where human beings are supposed to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. Okay, that's where this attitude towards nature, where we're torturing it and twisting it and hurting it, comes from, where we're just destroying the natural world and natural wonders and natural beauty. But of course, this is reading a very truncated version of Genesis. If you look right at Genesis starts with placing man as part of this interconnected web of creation, right? Just look at the week. We use a lunar week, and the reason we do is because Genesis does. It's showing that, man, you're part of this interconnected thing. Your whole being is tied up with the rhythms of creation, of nature. And all that points to not utility, not forcing to get as much as you can, but actually the Christian view and the Judeo-Christian, because it comes from Jewish roots, is the whole purpose of being set in this rhythm of creation's ups and downs and stuff, is to rest, not to do. Because the week ends with the Sabbath, with the resting in God and just being rejoicing in creation, not racking it with torture to get what you want out of it. But on the other hand, Christianity did also mythologize the natural world, right? If you see in Genesis, the sun and the moon are just lamps. They're not gods. They're just hanging there. And this is actually a really good thing, because it does lead to modern science and all the goods of modern science. Because the Judeo-Christian tradition, and Greek thought comes in here too, but says that, look, there's rational laws. Creation is rational. It's made by a rational deity, right? Christians believe the logos, right? Rationality itself, the word, was in the beginning that created all things. So you could look for rational patterns, and that's what leads to modern science. Most ancient cultures, just everything is at the capricious whims of various deities, and then there's no point to look for laws and stuff, because it's just arbitrary. So yeah, Christianity did do that, and that's what leads to modern science, and that's a good thing. But modernity and Western culture and modernity that spreads from Western culture took parts of that Christian vision, but not all of it, and that's the problem. So is Christianity to blame? Well, Christians are that abandon their Christian duty, but not Christianity itself. Look, for example, at St. Francis of Assisi. After that long purgation, where we got rid of just seeing, as G.K. Chesterton says, where humanity had to purge itself of all the horrible deities that were seen in all the different parts of nature. We had to purgate ourselves for about 1,200 years, and then we can have someone like St. Francis, who loves creation, who is in tune with creation. And St. Francis got it exactly right. Everybody just intuitively loves St. Francis's attitude towards creation. He sees creation as his sister, as his little sister, and we could get into that because it's not right to see nature and stuff as greater than humanity, because it's not. But to see it as, look, this is my sister that God created too, and we cherish her and rejoice in her and rejoice in all these wonderful things God's given us. So, of course, it's not Christianity's fault. It's the way that certain Christians acted that led to a post-Christian culture. Look at another from the High Middle Ages, this time of St. Francis, all these people a little bit later on, but St. Thomas Aquinas, and this is the person that I really, really want to get to and really want to discuss today, is St. Thomas said, and this is a long quote, but it's worth reading in full, and this is from his commentary on that passage we talked about in John, where the Word, rationality itself, was in the beginning, right? The second person of the Trinity is the Word. And St. Thomas is commenting on that, and I want to read some of his comments. He says, all existing things can be considered in two ways, either as they are in themselves or as they are in the Word. Considered in themselves, not all things constitute life, nor are they alive. For some things are inanimate, other things are living beings. Right? Okay, I think we would agree with that, and we're going to see how we've moved into a culture of dead things. But St. Thomas wasn't. The earth, for instance, was made, as also were the metals, and neither is life nor has life. The animals were made, human beings were made, and it is not that in themselves they are life, they simply have life. Yet, if things are considered as they are in the Word, right, in God himself, in his conception of everything, they not only have life, they are life. For the original essence of every existing thing dwells as an idea in God's wisdom. This essence considered the pattern by which the Word created a particular thing. And this essence is life. Thus, a precious vessel created by an artist is in itself neither is life nor has life. The original idea of the vessel, however, previously conceived in the artist's mind, in a certain sense has life insofar as it lives as ideal knowledge in the artist's mind, right? So, while it's in our mind, it has life, right? We're playing with it. We're going to create this thing because it's an ideal in our mind. Not that it is life, for even though it is known by the artist, is not intrinsically part of his nature nor of his being, right? If I think of a really cool video game I want to make, it's not an intrinsic part of my nature to make video games. With God, however, this is different. This is so good. God's knowing is his life. Like, there's no difference between his knowing and his life and his nature. And so whatever is in God not only has life, but really is life. Because whatever is in God belongs to his nature. Consequently, any created thing dwells in God as creative essence. If, then, all existing things are considered as they are in the Word, right, the second person of the Trinity, they indeed are life. So all things. And he talks about this too. That was his commentary on John, but he talks about this in the Summa Theologica too. But in God, all things are alive. And God creates everything off these patterns, these ideals that St. Thomas talks about in his mind, right? And the Greek philosopher Plato, sometimes when people read him and his idea of the forms and of ideals, they think, okay, and this is a horrible representation of Plato's ideas, but I've heard it from so many people when they read Plato that, oh, there's some perfect chair floating off somewhere, and all chairs are instances of that chair. But no, there isn't some perfect chair floating off somewhere. God has an idea of what chairness is, and every created physical material chair is a participation in God's image of chairness, of treeness. Every rock is a participation in God's idea of what a rock is, and in God's mind, that is life. So this idea of the great ideals in the mind of God is really, really important to understand all that there is. But these ideals are not like some chair floating off, some ideal chair. They're more like great angels, right? Dr. Peter Kreeft said somewhere that the one thing we got wrong sometimes about these ideals, something that Plato and Aristotle and the Greeks missed, is that the idea is less like just some chair that looks perfect. It's more like Zeus. It's more like this living creature. And so you can take the image that C.S. Lewis, he talks about the ideal of lions and lionhood in his book, The Problem of Pain. And I think it's a really good image to think of, oh, the ideal lion is not just, oh, some really good looking lion. It's something like Aslan in his Narnia, right? So in God, everything is like that. And we've forgotten that. And we've forgotten, that leads us to forget some of the wonder of creation, because a normal human being has this wonder at creation just from living and seeing things, and wow, that's a beautiful house, and that's a beautiful sky, and that's all this stuff is amazing, and it blows my mind. And we've lost that wonder because we just see everything as dead things in our culture. What can I get out of that? What can I do to that? So a lot of times we even do that to other persons. Luckily, we don't do it as much yet, but that's where our culture of death and dead things that leads to the culture of death that St. John Paul II talked about, that's where it's leading to, is to see even people as, oh, that's something else. Anything outside of myself is a dead thing that I do stuff and I want to get something out of. And that's the worst attitude we could ever have, that attitude not of gratitude. I hate to say that, but we should have an attitude of gratitude and not of trying to squeeze as much as we can out of everything. So how do we recapture this wonder that St. Francis and St. Thomas and many other great saints had? How do we recapture that and step out of our culture of death and dead things? Well, the first thing we have to do is step out of the decayed rags of an abandoned Christianity that we have, right? Because our culture right now is not a pagan culture, it's not a Christian culture, it's a Christian culture that we got sick of Christianity and left Christianity. So it's even worse than what a pagan, non-Christian, non-Jewish culture would be. It's more evil and it's worse to live in. So we have to step outside that mindset. I remember the image Chesterton says of appreciating a horse for what it is. The best way is if you just grow up with horses and you love them and you get that tradition from your fathers of loving horses and you're just amazed. That's the best way. But if we've got into this attitude of seeing it just as a really slow car, just seeing it as, oh, it doesn't get me from A to B as well as a car, well, then sometimes we have to shock ourselves by seeing how terrifying and different a horse is. So we have to go out of ourselves and look at it the way the first caveman would have seen a horse, as some kind of monster, right? And that's what we kind of have to do ourselves. And for this, I think we need to use one of the things that the Second Vatican Council talked about in its document, Inter Mirifica, right? Inter Mirifica means among the wonders. And what's the wonders it's talking about? It's not talking about nature and stuff, it's talking about the modern wonders of mass media, right? We can use these. We're kind of sick of them because we've used them horribly. Well, some of us are sick of them. I know I often am. But we need to use these. We're Inter Mirifica. We're among the wonders. And that can help us recapture wonder. And one of the best places to do this, I think, is the animated films by Studio Ghibli. It's a Japanese animating studio, and it has a bunch of movies, and I want to talk about a few specifically, but I think they're really good at helping us recapture this wonder that we've lost and this conception that all things are alive and a new appreciation for nature. You can see this in just its normal movies that don't have any magical stuff, that are just about like love stories, like On Poppy Hill. This On Poppy Hill and movies like it, you can see in Studio Ghibli, the animators, and especially some of the main creators like Miyazaki, he's one of the main creators for it, just love the ocean and the sky, and they really pour that love of nature. You can see it in their movies. So even if you're just watching a movie like On Poppy Hill, which I love, you can see this love of nature. It's kind of like watching a movie of Studio Ghibli with these nature, this love of nature, and it is kind of like reading one of Tolkien's books, where you just, that love of nature just seeps into you when you're reading Tolkien or when you're watching these movies. Or you could look at another film I want to talk about, a Studio Ghibli film that I don't like as much, is but it's the first one I saw, is Princess Mononoke, which is just raw representation of nature without Christianity getting in the way, just man's raw reaction to nature and how terrifying it is, how different it is from man, but still alive and very fragile to man's evil. And I think that can shock us to see in a healthy way, to re-look at nature. But even better is the movie that I really, really want to talk about today, is one of their most popular ones, is Spirited Away. Now, Spirited Away is a fantasy myth, very imbued with Shintoism, right? And Shintoism believes in 800 myriads of gods, right? Everything's a god to them. There's a god of the table, a god of the doorpost, a god of, dinner in the morning. Everything has a god. That's why it's 800 myriads of gods. And that's bad and evil and decayed, and the devil's tricked people if you're thinking that you worship these things. And we need to be cognizant of that when we're watching stuff that comes from a Shintoist perspective. But in this film, I'm going to say, though, how I think it's a good thing for us. But in this film, Spirited Away, it's about a little girl that gets stuck through the disrespect of her parents. Her parents don't respect nature, and they're kind of caricatures of Western people. They're Japanese, but they're kind of caricatures of this modernity that don't respect what God has given us. So through that, she gets stuck in a world of spirits, a world where she sees the spirit of every single thing. And I think this helps us Westerners remember what Thomas was talking about, because we've forgotten. We've forgotten what it's like to think of lions not as just some animal that either needs to be protected or hunted or whatever we want to do to a lion, but to see lions as like Aslan, just good in themselves, and we're grateful just for what they are in themselves, and we don't worship them. And we see this in this movie Spirited Away, where each concrete thing has a great spirit, and these spirits are very anthropomorphized. They're very human in a way, which is a good thing, because the ideals in God that have life, these great, and I would think that there are angels that represent his ideals. There's an angel, and I'll go over this more in a different episode where I talk about the angels, but there's an angel of, swordness that is in charge of making sure swords are swords, or an angel of the planet Earth, or an angel of the solar systems, or of stars, right? These great ideal angels. And this movie really shows, or of chairs, or of anything, shows that these ideals in God, from a Christian perspective, right? It's a Shinto, they're not showing this, but it shows to us, if we watch it with our hearts open, what these things are really like. They're not just some abstract thing, they're personal, right? Because they come from God. In God, all these things that have life, these ideals, are personal. And I think this film is really good at shocking us back into seeing the world as this gift and creation. And I think all the Studio Ghibli movies are really good at doing that. So if we want to recapture what Thomas said, that in God all things are alive, I think it's imperative that we recapture this, imperative that we look at nature differently than we are right now. And one of the helps that God has given us in the modern era to do this is Studio Ghibli movies, especially Spirited Away, and I recommend that you go and watch it, and I'll make a review of it later on down the road. Well, I hope that was helpful to you. You have a good day. God bless you.